want you to imagine a couple coming in after a fight about the dishwasher, coming into therapy. That is, the pursuer says, I always have to ask for help. It makes me feel like I'm parenting you. And the withdrawer says, no matter what I do, it's never enough. I feel like I'm constantly failing. At first, both partners think they are fighting about fairness, chores, respect. But in individual therapy, they each start tracing the wound underneath. For the pursuer, the dishwasher hits an old abandonment rejection wound. If I have to ask, it means I'm alone. If you loved me, you would notice. Their move is to protest, criticize, escalate, and push for reassurance. The function is protection. I'm trying to make sure I matter. For the withdrawer, the dishwasher hits an old shame failure wound. I can't get it right. I'm going to disappoint you, so I need to shut down or defend myself. Their move is to minimize, avoid, say fine, or rigidly refuse. The function is protection. I'm trying not to be consumed by shame or overwhelm. The healing work is not just communicate better. It's helping both people learn their scabs. The pursuer learns when I feel alone, I get big and angry, but underneath, I'm scared that I don't matter. The withdrawer learns when I feel criticized, I disappear, but underneath, I'm scared I'm not enough. And then therapy helps them practice the new move. The pursuer says, I know this is hitting my old feeling of being alone. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm asking because I need to feel like we're a team. And the withdrawer says, I'm noticing I want to shut down because I feel like I'm failing. I need a minute to regulate, but I do want to come back and figure this out. The point of this story is that the fight is the scab getting bumped. Individual therapy helps each partner know the wound in their own protective moves, how to regulate the activation and practice vulnerability instead of protest or shutdown.
Welcome to Relationship Advice. My name is Lauren Mocarey. I am joined by my friends and co-hosts Colter Bloxam and Cayla Bozovich. We are 3 licensed professional counselors and 3 real-life best friends. And as we dive in today to talking about some of the individual work that can heal some of our attachment patterns and relationship wounds, I really want to start out by just highlighting the importance of doing relational work in relationship. It's a beautiful thing that you're here listening. We have so much great content to share with you on the podcast. And I just want to put out a reminder that information does not equate to transformation. And so we have a 10-day couples challenge for you and your partner to dive in and actually get into some of the experience right away together. This is free. You can find a link in the show notes to get started with the 10-day challenge. We also have an online community called Relationship Academy, where the 3 of us show up regularly to provide additional education as well as answer questions. And it gives a space for you all to share and relate and ask questions of one another and learn from each other. And I think this is such a fundamental need when we are trying to rewire relational patterns. So today, we're going to be diving into some of the individual focus that we might do through individual therapy when we're trying to heal some of these pursuer or withdrawer wounds. I love, Colter, how you highlighted. You really got a lot in that vignette. Like you highlighted, like, here's what it looks like on the surface. Here's what's happening underneath. And Cayla, I was really curious what was standing out to you as you were listening to that.
Yeah, I think some of that and just like preparing in general for this topic, because I think this tends to be like a $1 million question for people is like, how do I heal this? Fine, I've accepted through listening to this podcast that I have some variation of insecure attachment. Fine, I've identified that I'm a pursuer. I've identified that I'm a withdrawer, and I get it. But like, I don't want this to keep happening. I want this to be done with. I don't want to keep feeling this way. So how do I heal this? How do I stop being insecure? How do I create secure attachment? And is it possible?
Well, is it possible?
And here's a really important disclaimer thing that I want to highlight. I was just talking about this in one of my groups a few weeks ago. We were looking at the boundary continuum and the concept of individuation that we talk about on this podcast all the time, that what it's like to be me is different than what it's like to be you. And we were looking at, here are the insecure attachment patterns where we pursue or we withdraw. But the reality is that when we do individuated, secure communication and attachment, we are still going to have to sometimes feel pain and disappointment and frustration and fear. and grief. Like these are things that are still very hard to feel. And so we need to have enough relational support around us in order to trust that we can handle feeling these things, which I think is another really significant reason when we're doing some of our individual work here to look at like, do I have the infrastructure? Do I have other relational supports who can be present with me if I'm going to still feel some of these really hard things?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. We don't just heal from information. Like, oh, I've got the information and I have some new tools and I'm going to do those things now. It has to come in experience and relationship.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
sometimes, with insecure attachment, there is a pretty deep wound there. Sometimes there's even attachment trauma connected to that insecure attachment presentation that we see. And this is where I get a little bit like territorial with relationship coaches because there is a need to do some intentional healing for a lot of us who have experienced insecure attachment and attachment wounding in our childhood.
Yeah, you're saying, Kayla, territorial, like coaching sometimes will address, like, okay, here's the
Here's what you
ABC,
do.
what you need to go do, what you need to go
Hmm.
practice. But that's not the same thing as, like, okay, sit with somebody who's really practiced and experienced at knowing how to pace and how to, create live experience in your nervous system that is going to help you kind of like unearth and
Mhm.
digest and metabolize things that have been really stuck and will continue to be stuck until there's safety to move that through.
Exactly. Yes, it'd be really nice if we could just action through our attachment, but that's just not the reality.
Mhm.
Hmm.
That is the crux of this, unfortunately, is that we do need a trained therapist a lot of times to feel through some of the things that have really hurt us in our lives, and it's not about just reading and actioning ourselves out of this sometimes. So,
And I'm not sure if this needs to be named, but we're talking about what pursuers and withdrawers need to work on in individual therapy. Obviously, it's not a blanket that will work for everybody, but they're going to be different things.
mhm,
And when one person has been doing some therapy and then, they get their partner to go and their partner comes back and says, here's what I'm working on, it's probably going to be very different than what you are working on. And that is probably a good thing, but we can respond to them like, well, that's what you're doing with your therapist. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. Like, this is what I'm doing. I heard it said a while ago, I think when I was like in grad school or something, that the therapist's job is to bring balance to somebody's life. And so, if you've got someone who's super hot about everything all the time, the therapist's job is to help them regulate a little bit more and see that not everything is on fire. And the inverse is the therapist's job with our withdrawer is to help activate them a little bit more. So you're going to have very different treatment plans and very different goals in therapy.
mhm.
Mhm.
Well, at the same time, there will be some overlap. There are some things that we both need to work on
Hmm.
regardless of our position. And then to your point, Coulter, I love that you're saying that, especially probably for our pursuers who are worried about their withdrawers doing the right kind of therapy so that they can get
Mhm.
better. Is
Hmm.
that there it is going to be different, the type of therapy that they're doing than what you're
Mhm.
doing. There is
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, the other thing that I know can be really, I mean, this can be hard from so many angles as far as like knowing what type of therapy we need, but the reality about healing attachment is that we do need corrective experiences that can be felt by our nervous system, right? So it's not just about sitting and telling a therapist, here are all of the really hard, horrible things that happened when I was a kid, or here are the ways my partner and I get really stuck. It's about actually connecting with the hard feelings in real time with a safe person who can like hold space and be attuned to that while knowing you're not going to get flooded by it. And that work is often slow and it's hard always to track. Like we can get through a 50-minute session and be like, okay, wait, what did we do here? Like, did I check a box? Not really, but did I feel my way through something that, maybe for the last 30 years of my life, I have not been able to tap into that feeling. And I was able to go there for even 5% today. And that's a little bit new. And so I just want to put that out there, we're looking for lived experience with something new in a therapy session. That's what's moving us towards healing.
Mhm. Yes. And one of the things that I've heard time and time again in my training in attachment is that attachment heals in relationships. And so there's healing in relationship with a therapist, with a friend that we're practicing this with a parent who created some of these wounds, or with a partner. I mean, and I said or, doesn't mean we have to do it in all of those places. It can be in any of those places, but because attachment is a relational issue, then it heals with your relationship with yourself, but there is a component of attachment that heals in relationships with others.
I say it all the time on the podcast, but this is why I'm so obsessed with group therapy,
Hmm.
because it is literally a like surrogate space to come and notice like, okay, like what triggers you? What do you need to have safety? What's it like to practice expressing what it's like to be you in a different way, in a slower way? What's it like to practice boundaries in this space? What's it like to share something vulnerable and be met with validation? And we're constantly slowing it down and noticing it and making it intentional. And I mean, I just wish there was some way I could verbalize the things I hear from my clients in group therapy, like what a difference that makes having that space.
Okay, we're 11 minutes in. Lauren brought up group therapy. Cayla, you had 10 minutes. I had 12, so you win the bet this time.
How long it took me to bring it up.
Nice.
No, I have been wanting you to bring it up because I love group therapy. When I was in grad school, I had to do a group therapy. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is like the best thing anybody can do
Mhm.
in therapy. And no one's ever going to do it because it's scary and hard.
Mhm.
If you're in Arizona, check out one of our groups. But even if you're not, which there's a good chance you're not, look for some groups in your area. Go on Psychology Today, look for groups, or type in group therapy into there's website google.com and see if you can find something, because it really is. It's different. And Lauren, you've been able to put such great language to it. Like there's an experiential component that you can get in there where you can practice these skills in real time. And the group therapy is kind of like a microcosm of reality with somebody who is sort of moderating that environment to some degree. So can't speak highly enough of it. Lauren's groups are amazing, but there's great groups everywhere in the world.
Yeah. So, one of the things we want to really highlight in our conversation today is like for those who are looking to do more of their individual healing, that is going to then translate into how they're showing up in relationships, maybe looking at what are some of the goals that you might be bringing into your individual therapy or even into group therapy. I still encourage, if I have clients going into group therapy, like what's a goal you're bringing into this group? Are you trying to practice sharing a little bit more when usually you would just sit and observe the whole time? Are you trying to practice actually containing and listening and being curious a little bit more when normally you would just share your thoughts the whole time? And so a lot of times when I have a brand new individual client, I'm asking them, we're making a treatment plan and I'm asking them, what are your goals for therapy? And usually I think people have thought about like their symptoms, like, well, I'm feeling really anxious. My partner and I are in conflict all the time. Here's how I want my partner to be different. I want to stop feeling like I don't matter. And so we want to be able to just kind of give some more language of like, what are some of the more tangible things maybe that the pursuers and withdrawers might be working on a little bit differently in their individual work.
Yeah, and I think it's also important for us to address, like, again, this component that we're both going to have to do. If you have insecure attachment, no matter how it presents itself, there are some staple things that we need to be able to both do to be more successful in relationships. And I'm wondering if we can hit those first, the things that we both are going to do, and then we can branch off into the specifics for each side.
If I'm understanding you right, Cayla, I think like you're saying, regardless of whether I'm on the pursuer or the
Mhm.
withdrawer side,
Yep.
and I'm thinking like one of the things I'm going to need to do is figure out some of the origins of like where my attachment
Yes.
wounds are coming from. And maybe even before that, figuring out like what are my attachment raw spots. That's
Uh-huh.
language we use, but it's like if I constantly am feeling like I'm not enough or I'm constantly feeling like I'm not worthy of being cared for or I'm not important or I'm not a priority, and that's something that's consistently coming up in my relationship, regardless of which position I'm in, I'm going to want to be doing some excavation work there of like, where
Mhm.
did this first show up in my life?
For sure. And you can even do that without a therapist. I mean, some of these goals you can start to evaluate for yourself without even walking into a therapist's office, and you should. So, common raw spots for our withdrawers is feeling like they're not enough, feeling like they can never get it right, feeling like they fail in relationships. And on the flip side of that, Lauren, you hit some of the pursuers, which are feeling like I'm not important, I'm not a priority, or my needs are just too much. I'm not lovable because I have too many needs. So
Mhm.
those are the raw spots that Lauren was mentioning. And then we'd want to trace from there the first time that we felt that way. What were the things that contributed to this messaging that is so, programmed into my system? And the
Mhm.
things that we're often looking for are times that I felt betrayal, times that I
Like
felt
as a
abandoned.
child even. Uh-huh.
Yes, when I'm really young, exactly, right? In
Mhm.
my family of origin or in my first relationships, the times that I felt betrayal, the times that I felt abandoned, neglected, rejected, or abused. Those are the oftentimes the places where wounding occurs that then translates into insecure attachment.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes these are more obvious and overt to us, like, especially if we experienced abuse, like physical abuse or, we were experiencing intense neglect, like that can be more obvious. But I think there's other things that I notice are less obvious to people because it's like, well, that's just how I grew up. Like I didn't know that it could be any different. A betrayal could be like, well, I think of I had a friend one time who was like, I had a sibling who was a couple years older who was like the sibling was very abusive to the child and the parents just never protected, and so the child just felt very unprotected and constantly scared and constantly fighting and and so it's like there's a lot of different ways
Mhm.
that our nervous systems might experience like I'm not important, like I'm not going to get my
Mhm.
needs met.
Mhm. Yeah, so we want to know where that starts because when we get into relationship, that will get hit over and over and over again. And then it's really common that we will project that onto our partner as the origin. But if we can walk into a relationship with the knowledge and awareness, then we can almost like expect that that's going to get hit and teach our partner to care for that wound in a different way rather than getting confused by believing that the origin is in that relationship.
This might be going a little bit on like another path, but I think something important about what you just said, Kayla, I heard you say we want to find out the origin of this wound and then teach our partner to care for the wound in a different way. A huge part of individual therapy, though, is also learning for
Yeah,
ourself to care for
for
this
sure.
wound in a different way. And I think that can actually be sometimes one of the protective moves we go to, like the childlike moves we go to is like, I want my partner to just never trigger this. I want my if you know this trigger exists, then don't ever hit it. Right. Versus seeing that like we probably both have our own wounds. And if maybe my caregivers as a child weren't attending to these needs in the way I needed, that's some of the work I'm doing individually is like I'm trying to bring my adult self into the picture to care for these feelings in a new way too.
Which is why we often choose a partner who does trigger those things because they almost feel kind of like this unfinished business or something that
Yes.
I need to get to and I need to be able to check this off my list so I can prove that I actually do matter.
Yeah, and that's exactly what a lot of the attachment science says is I'm trying to have a different experience or a different outcome this time, so I am
Mhm.
attracting a partner who's going to activate this in a similar way, which is
Mhm.
maddening. But also we should expect that because that's part of this.
Yeah. Well, and it's what feels familiar. I see that when I think of like so much of the individual work I do, I see that in two directions too with attachment. Like I'll for sure see it in couples where it's like I need my partner to do this better than my parents did. But I also still see it with adults with like, I still want my parents to correct this. Like I still want my parents to acknowledge that they messed it up and that they weren't there for me. And I need them to apologize and I need them to take accountability. And it's like, in either direction that like blame is going, there is healing work where we need to learn how to care for some of those things ourselves too.
Mhm. Some of the other things that both clients, both sets of pursuers and withdrawers who have insecure attachment are going to have to work on is their relationship to emotion and what was modeled for them in childhood, and then therefore what did they learn. Now, of course, we'll get into this because the way in which we heal that is going to be a little different for each person, but we still need to look at that for both sides of pursuers and withdrawers.
Can you give some examples of like what might people be looking back
Mm-hmm.
at their childhoods to find there?
Yeah. Some of the things that stand out to me are, we never talked about anything, right? So, like when hard things were coming up in school or in friendships or at home, I wasn't talking to my parents vulnerably. We didn't do that. So, I didn't learn then how to understand my own emotions or how to express my emotions because we weren't talking about that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I hear on the flip side of that is like I was always aware of my parents' emotions. Like my mom or my dad was always super angry, and so we had to like walk on eggshells and find ways to take care of their emotion. And so like big emotions were always present, and so I got really crafty with how to feel big feelings or express big feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are some of the immediate things that stand out for me.
And there's so much nuance there. This is, I think, what can be so like cool about individual therapy is like there is a lot of nuance as far as like your own personality and your own temperament and how that's going to interplay with your family system. Because I mean, how often do we have a sibling that had like a totally different emotional experience in our, in our same household?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm also thinking about like even just learning the way that we have learned to communicate, the way that we have learned to protect ourselves. Like, I think that goes hand in hand with understanding where some of these wounds come from. And as a trauma therapist, right, one of the lines of curiosity I'm always helping clients to explore are, okay, where did this show up for the first time? Like, what was the feeling there? Like, this was the circumstance where then you felt abandoned or you felt helpless or you felt like nobody was going to meet your need. And then what did you do as a child? How did you cope with that as a child? Did you distract yourself with books? Did you distract yourself with homework? Did you go the perfectionist route? Like, okay, then I will just be as perfect as possible and try to get validation that way. Did you go the reactive route? Were you always trying to get louder to get that need met? Like, did you just shut down and go inward? Did you find pornography? Did you use substances? Like, what did you do? Because whatever you did as a child, that probably is now showing up in some way as an established pattern.
For sure. Yep. So we're looking at our relationship to emotion. We're looking at the protective moves and the ways that we learned how to communicate and what was modeled for us or not. And that's for both sides of the coin. We want to really take a deep dive there and understand those patterns and how they're going to show up in our relationships. Some of the other things I think just across the board that a lot of people who are not listening to this podcast don't actually understand, and that is the importance of curiosity and the ability to take perspective. And that goes hand in hand with this concept of individualization, which we talk about. What did I say? Individuation. This is just another Caylaism. Like, just go with it.
Yeah, but that one can't be. That's too important of a word.
Individualization. Yeah. Individuation. and what that actually means, because I think that's a really important piece of how we do relationships differently.
One of the other things I think across the board, like we all need to be exploring what's our own relationship to our emotions, and hand in hand with individuation, it's not going to be the same for everybody, right? We've talked so many times on this podcast about the three of us and like our relationship to anger and our relationship to fear. And like, it's different for Cayla than it is for me, than it is for Colter.
Yeah. I mean, we're always trying to master that language in our relationship, that what it's like to be you is different than what it's like to be me, and accepting that and tolerating that about the other person.
It's super, super important. And it's one of the muscles of attachment that's needed to then be a safe partner for other people. If I'm not able to do these things, then the likelihood that there's going to be constant protection that I keep receiving because I'm not being safe is high. So we do all across the
Mhm.
board, pursuers and withdrawers have to know how to be a safe responder and a safe receiver of vulnerability. And so that is something that we're teaching in individual therapy, but also constantly on this podcast.
I would love to move us into like, if you are the pursuer in your relationship or if you are the withdrawer, what are some of the things that are probably specific to the individual work that you will need to do? And this is really based on, the work, especially that Cayla and I do. Colter, I know you've done some of this work too with anxiety and really kind of parsing down, like when we have a pursuer in our office, there's some specific things that we're working on that are going to look different than with our withdrawers.
Yeah, I think for pursuers, the first thing that comes to mind for me is this righteousness and the rules of the game. That this is how I do something, and so everybody else should do it that way too.
Yeah.
Cayla, actually, remember you asking me that question a few weeks ago when I was upset about someone not doing something the right way. And you said, you're like, is that how you would do it? And I was like, yes, it is. And you go, oh, okay, well, it makes sense that you think everybody should do it that way. But
I'm super glad you received that little subtle hint there, Colter, because I could see why you were getting so stuck. It made sense to me because I also probably would have done things in a similar way that you were wanting this person to do them, right? Because we tend to have a similar view in that way, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't work when we carry that mantra into our relationships that because I do it this way, this is what quote unquote healthy people do because I read a book on this one time. And so this is how we should do things. There's just like such a strong rigidity there for following the rules and having it be the right or healthy way.
Our pursuers can get lost in this idea that we're seeing things differently and perceive it as I'm seeing things right and you're seeing things wrong. So I don't really know where the room is for like us just being kind of different people here.
Well, and so here's then where I end up doing a lot of work individually with my pursuers when this is the place they're stuck in, is actually shifting from this practice of like, I just expect you to do it this way because it's the right way, or I'm going to instruct you or criticize you when you don't do it the right way, and shifting to the vulnerability of like making a request, right? Sharing, here's what it's like to be me. Here's why it feels important for me to have it this way. And then either asking, right, are you willing and able to meet this request for me, or help me understand what's different about what it's like to be you, right? And pursuers, right, they're protecting from vulnerability a lot of times through this indirect strategy of like, I don't want to have the vulnerability of making a request that someone might say no to, because if they say no to my request, that's going to hit the wound that I'm not important, I'm not a priority, I'm not good enough. And so that's a lot of the work here is like, how can I find enough security in myself to know, why do I want it this way? And even if that's different for someone else, it's still okay that I want it this way. And then can I bring a request that's based on what it's like to be me, not based on what it should also be like to be you?
Yeah, what you're saying reminds me of like a sort of like a subset of this too that drives me nuts. And that is like this concept of like, if you wanted to, you would. And that is that same thing of like, I don't want to make the vulnerable request. I just think that like, this is what healthy people do. So if my partner's not doing this, then they don't want to, or they're not healthy. And so that's why. And I'm really quick to make this meaning and then rush to, well, what do I do with that now? And it is incorrect, pursuers. If he wanted to, he would. I hate that saying. I wish I could extract it from pop culture because it's dumb. It does not address individuation at all. And it's the opposite of vulnerability. So it makes me I'm sorry, I can't get off of it. I've talked about it probably every week in therapy.
Here's the thing, when we're actually doing boundary work, we're looking at like, if I have a request, the other person needs to consider, are they willing to and are they able to?
Correct.
Okay, so even if I don't want to do something that my partner is needing of me, even if I don't want to, it doesn't mean I'm not willing to.
Correct.
Right? I might be willing to. and this is a really silly example, but my partner and I live in a house with a lot of stairs. And so a lot of times a request that we're making back and forth is like, will you be the one to go downstairs and get the thing, get the water, get the dessert, get the snacks, right? And it's like, yeah, I don't want to, but of course if you ask, I will, right? And that goes for both of us. So yeah, people need to strike that from their vocabulary.
Please.
If they wanted to, they might not, but they might be willing to if you're
Yes.
willing to say that it's important to you.
Yes. We have to ask, and we have to stop making meetings so quick, and we have to stop moving to action so quick. So there's a pacing that's necessary here for pursuers to slow the hell down. Slow down your mind, slow down your behavior. We don't have to move 100 miles an hour. We can move 30, and that is still moving. And that is important. So that's really often the case for across the board for pursuers, is that their brain is going really fast and making meaning really fast. And we've got to pull it apart and chunk it up so that we can see that something different is probably happening on the other side.
I think that within that same vein of pursuers focusing so much on, I need the other person to want to. I need the other person to agree. I need the other person. Like, they're so over-oriented sometimes to what the other person thinks, feels, and does,
For sure.
that a lot of the individual work is coming back to like, okay, slow down and first check out, what do you think? What do you feel? And why? That even goes back to some of that, origin work we were talking about. Why is it this way for you? Why might that be different for somebody else, right? If this is important for you, can we think about how we might bring this to the table? In the same vein, one of the things that I often will see pursuers get really stuck on is they don't like being brought requests, because when somebody makes a request of them, it feels manipulative. Like, that's the word that I'll hear people use. Like, how dare they ask me for this? They know that it's going to be hard for me to say no. Like, because it's going to be hard for me to say no, they shouldn't ask.
And so then that lands as like, you're trying to coerce me into this thing instead. And the reality is that we need to be able to hear a request. We can't control other people. That's not the answer here, is that, and I liked what you said, Lauren, the other focus is so common for the pursuer. So I'm more focused on, don't ask me this kind of thing because you know me. But the control is actually in how I receive that, not how I change the request.
Right.
So I'm need
constantly
to be
reminding my pursuers, like, people are allowed to ask you for anything. They're allowed to ask you for anything.
Yes.
And it's then your work to check in with yourself before you respond and consider, if I said yes to this, how would that impact me? And if I needed to say no, why do I need to say no? And that it's your work to have your own boundaries, to not rely on other people, to not ask you for things just because you struggle to hold boundaries.
Yes. And boundaries are not just saying no to everything and trying to control everything. It is responding to requests in a values-based way that considers both your needs and the relationship needs. It's, go back and listen to an episode on boundaries if you need a refresher. We've done like 100. So, and we will probably do 100 more.
I was going to say we should do more.
Yes. One of the things specific to pursuers in the emotional realm. So we said both sides need to work on feeling their feelings and feeling them in different ways based on, what was conditioned. The thing that typically happens for pursuers, though, is that their emotions are very big and reactive and fast. And so, again, we're needing to slow down our pursuers and oftentimes moving them out of their secondary emotional response, which is more of like the anger-based emotions, shame-based emotions, and into pain or fear-based emotions. So helping them get a little bit more depth of vulnerability. And it's common for pursuers to want to talk about emotions. They like that. Like, that's one of the strengths that we had mentioned on a previous episode when we were talking about pursuers. But to go into real vulnerability, to feel that vulnerability of being, at risk for rejection or pain, they don't like to do that as much. So there is this difference of talking about emotions and then feeling vulnerability that we need to help pursuers shift into.
I'm just going to double click there and name, like, vulnerability is a fear-based emotion. So a lot of time that is like, we will spin in anger because anger is more about control.
Yeah.
Right? This should be different. You should be different. How dare you? The audacity versus I'm scared that there's a risk here. There's a risk that I might feel pain. There's a risk that I might be let down. There's a risk that I might have to grieve something. That's way harder.
Yeah. The last big thing that stands out for me, and obviously you guys can add your own big things too, but the thing that I see so often in individual sessions with my pursuers that I'm trying to move them out of is this, like, again, this movement toward action before we have actually thought something out fully. And that could be leaving a relationship, that could be leaving a job, that could be just like deciding that this partner is not compatible with you when we maybe only have gone on one date. Like, there is just like this fast-paced decision making and movement toward action that I will suggest that hey, could we think about this for 30 days? Could we track this and see what happens in 30 days and check your feelings every day? And let's see if it is always bad, or if in fact that in 2 days this clears up and you feel better.
The tracking is such a good thing to do in our relationship because it just gives us good evidence about what we're actually working with. You know, how frequently is this thing actually happening? That has been really illuminating for me in my relationship. Both ways.
Yes.
We did a little experiment a while back. I don't even really 100% remember what it was, but there was something to the degree of like, it was a question I would ask my wife. It was something like, you know, if I would ask her what was wrong and she said nothing, that I would push or something. And she would say, like, I always do that to her. And I'm like, no, I don't. Sometimes I just let you be. And so, we made some sort of rule where it was like, I was allowed to do that like 5 times over the course of however long. And we made little scraps of paper, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and stuck them on the refrigerator. And every time I did it, I ripped one up, and gave it to her. Like, I'm using one of my asks. And after like a week or 2, I had only used one. And at that point, the experiment had kind of run its course because we both saw, no, it's actually not happening that often. It feels like it's happening a lot, but we kind of have the evidence to show. And I might also say that perhaps like putting some sort of intention there maybe caused me to slow down a little bit more and pay a little bit more attention to it. So just, a big encouragement to track some of those things, that thing that's always happening or that never happens. Just track it. Just track it for 30 days and let's see.
Let's see. And I love what you said.
Well, and I'm just going to say one other time that this happened in my marriage, that it went the opposite. Is I was talking about how often we were fighting, and she was like, it's not that often. And then she went back and made a calendar of the last month of how often we had been in a fight, and came out of the room and was like, yep, it's been a lot. You're right. Once she was able to see it. So sometimes it goes the other way.
I've seen couples do this with intimacy. That's been really helpful for them, because there's this assumption that we're never having sex, or like you're always pursuing sex. And so if we just start to share that on our calendar, like maybe we put a little heart on the days that we had sex or something, so we can really keep track of that. There can be a lot of insight that we can gain.
You could
from
like draw
tracking.
a picture.
Yeah. What picture would you draw, Colter?
Just like whatever, what the sex was that last night. Draw that picture. So then you also know like what kind it was.
I love it. Great idea. Good suggestion.
That could be a fun game.
You take nothing else from this episode. Draw your sexual possession from the last time you had sex.
Right on the calendar on the fridge.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think, this probably applies in its own way to withdrawers too. But like, Cayla, when you're describing how fast pursuers go to action, from like trigger to action, this is one of the things that I think about. I have this like emotion processing map that I'm always taking people through. I think we probably have done an episode on this at some point too, where it's like, before you go to action, did you regulate? Like, did you just take some time to like be with your body and get yourself in your window of tolerance and just like get some of that energy that's so big for pursuers, like get the energy out, but don't do anything with it yet. Just focus on getting your nervous system back. And then once you regulated, we're still not going to action. We're processing. We're actually getting under the anger. What is the fear here? What is the pain here? What is there guilt? Is there grief? Is there, what are the values at play? Like what's in my control? What's not? Can we actually process through and then use the information that we just processed to go into action? So again, that is huge in the work that I'm doing with my pursuers in therapy.
And action could just be communicating. Sometimes we want to communicate too
Often.
fast. Mhm.
Often.
So action is a behavior.
Mhm.
So let's move over to our withdrawers and some of the things that they specifically need to work on in individual work.
Okay, the thing I want to start naming with withdrawers is a lot of times when we are in a withdraw or a disengaged position, it is because of some degree of overwhelm. Things feel too intense. They feel too much, too overwhelming. And when things feel too overwhelming, the brain shuts down. I heard somebody give this example once, like when you think of that catchy saying for wearing your seatbelt, like click it or ticket, right? People can understand that. Like I'm supposed to click my seatbelt in. But if somebody were to say like, okay, every time you get into the car, you need to look over your left shoulder and then take your right hand and reach it up over your left shoulder and then grab just above the metal part of the belt and then pull it at a 82-degree angle and then line it up and then click it and then pull this and then take a deep breath and then adjust your people would be it's like that's too much. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't follow all that.
That would take too long to read on the billboard too.
It would.
You get into a car accident.
But that is literally the point, right? It's like, that is how it feels for the withdrawer system. It feels like the things that are being asked of us are that level of instruction, and we just can't.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
so,
it's such a good point, though, that just that little phrase, click it or take it, like, okay, got it.
That I can do.
Mm-hmm. That I can do.
That I can do. Right. And so when things feel really overwhelming, we're actually trying to create more safety and slow things down even more first before we're going into action. So again, where pursuers jump to action really fast, the reactivity of withdrawers is like, I don't even try to get to the action. Right. And so we're actually trying to regulate and make sense of some of the overwhelm. Why is that so overwhelming? And where did you learn to do that when things are overwhelming? Well, when it's overwhelming, what are we actually feeling in the body? Like, can we just notice? Where does that show up? Is there some tension? What's the impulse? Is the impulse to shut down? Where does that start? Like, just bringing more awareness and kind of understanding why that shutdown system is happening, getting more connection to the body. Like, that is a lot of times the starting place in therapy for withdrawers.
And it's worth mentioning that, yes, certainly this is needed for overwhelm, but often this is needed for most emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there is a history of not really knowing what I feel or not feeling connected to my body. So if we ask a withdrawer, where do you feel that in their body? Where do you feel that in your body? Oftentimes they say, what? I don't know.
Well, they say, I don't know. And here's what you're connecting two things, Cayla, right? Like overwhelm is what's preventing us from connecting to the other emotions. Right? It's like to even try to connect to fear is too much. It's like all of those instructions, and I don't know how to do that. So I just don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we need to simplify the process for how do we connect to emotions in our body? How do we even recognize when they're showing up? And how do we make this a little bit more simple or natural or like build the muscle here? Because the truth is, a lot of withdrawers don't have the muscle for naming and feeling their feelings. So then how do we expect them to communicate their feelings?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one for withdrawers to work on is negotiating versus just a rigid no, that it's not binary. You don't just have to say yes or no. If it's not something that you want to do, maybe you could negotiate about it a little bit.
Yeah, we did a recent episode on this, which I think was so massively helpful. I've sent it to so many clients and friends, and it's so common. Again, even like pairing in that overwhelm, in this area. It's like I feel too overwhelmed, and so everything has to be no, or I don't like it, and so then I just say no to that. But we do need to slow that down and consider the opportunities on both sides if I say no or if I say yes to something, because it could also be the other thing, which is that people-pleasing tendency because I don't wanna, deal with the conflict.
Right, I'm just saying yes to everything, but then not following through.
Yeah, it could be a rigid no or just like a passive yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think even a lot of the work with this one too is being able to name when that overwhelm is coming up, right? To notice like, okay, I feel myself wanting to go to a rigid no because something feels overwhelming, and so now that's my cue to pause and check out what would I need to be able to say yes to even part of this, right? I think the overwhelm happens so quickly that we don't think that we're going to get more options. It's like, well, my partner, it's not going to be negotiable. Their feelings are so much bigger than mine. They're going to get so reactive, and so I just have to either do what they want or have this rigid boundary. Versus again, slowing it down. Why do I start to shut down? What is it about this that starts to overwhelm me? Can I just share about that?
Yes. Or even an adjacent issue that is also connected here a lot of times for withdrawers, which is I don't have any idea what my needs are. Like I need to get to know myself a little bit more so that I can even make a request because I don't know what I need. I don't know what's important to me. I don't even know my values. And so that is like getting to know myself and really slowing things down and getting more aware of my emotions, but also my preferences and my values so that then I can activate some of these tools for negotiations or making requests because that's oftentimes an unknown as well for withdrawers.
So I'm I'm going to do it. I'm going to bring it back to group therapy, but even if we're just thinking about the context of individual therapy or couples therapy, I think that with our withdrawers, a lot of times when they do go back and look at like where are the origins of this, there was not the experience that there was space for their feelings and needs. It was like I just learned that like there's not going to be space, so I might as well just like not even try. And so they need the reparative, corrective experience of somebody holding space, right? Of saying, we can go slow. It's okay if you don't know what you feel right now. Let's just check out if you notice any tension in the body, right? It's okay if you don't know what your value is. Let's look at a list of values and notice what stands out to you. Right? Like let's do this together. Let's be curious. They need the experience of somebody doing that with them and learning that it can be safe to look inward and not have somebody be like, "Oh, that was the wrong answer. Oh, you're not going fast enough." Oh, like actually my feeling just got bigger here and the little nugget that you just shared with me now has created an explosion over here.
Yes, and whether that's being done in group therapy or individual therapy, there is a need for role plays, I think, even on both sides of pursuers and withdrawers to have that felt experience in the relationship come alive with another person and have a different outcome. Because when you're so used to this cycle and this is the predictable outcome that is going to happen, then I don't even know what another option feels like. And so then I just keep avoiding taking the risk. So I think role plays can be so helpful.
This is how humans learn too. I mean, this is the basis of the work I do with anxiety and OCD is predicting if I engage in whatever uncomfortable behavior, how am I going to feel and what is going to happen, and then reviewing the results. And so often we think, well, if that happens, I'm not going to be able to handle whatever emotion comes up. It's not always that the negative consequence didn't occur. Sometimes it did occur and I was able to handle it.
Yeah.
Yes, because again, to revisit something we said with pursuers, we can't control the other person. We have to be able to have equipment or tools to deal with whatever response we get from the people in our lives that are triggered by us for whatever reason. So whether that's our parents or our friends or our boss or our partner, that we can't control the way they're going to respond. Even if we get healthier and we start to heal our attachment, the likelihood that somebody else is still going to respond in an unhealthy way is high. And so it's also gaining these tools for how do I combat the unhealthy thing that's going to keep happening.
Yeah. And this is where I think both directions. I had a client telling me just a few weeks ago, like, I love individual therapy and I do get a lot of that like deep dive excavation stuff here, but it's been through groups that I like hear other people who are different than me. Like this client's a withdrawer, and they're like, when I hear the pursuers describe what it's like to be them, but because they're not in my life and so they don't trigger me directly, I'm like, oh, is that what's going on? Like, oh, that's okay, that's a different perspective. And they were saying like, and then that stays with me, like out,
Mhm.
it's easier to kind of hold on to because I learned it relationally from another person.
Mhm.
All right, I think that's a good place for us to land the plane for today. Hope you guys were able to get something out of this episode. Check out the free 10-day couples challenge. Is it going to solve everything in your relationship? Maybe. I don't know, but probably not. But it'll help you reconnect just a little bit. It's free. Takes 2 seconds to sign up for, and then 10 seconds for the first email to land in your inbox. And then continue the conversation with Lauren, Cayla, and I on Relationship Academy. Also free to join. Link is in the show notes. All right. We will see you guys next time.